Bam. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back once again. It's your favorite time of the week. It's Keepin It Rio time, and this is the 267th edition of Keepin It Rio. I'm ecstatic because my guest today is someone that I'm really looking forward to chatting with. I think there's a lot of value that's going to be packed in today's episode, and we're going to change some people's lives. We're going to teach some people some things, and I think I'm probably going to learn more than anybody. So it is an absolute honor. Without any hesitation, please let me welcome Ty Adams to the show. Ty, good morning, my friend. How are you doing today?
Good morning. Good morning. Doing good. It's a beautiful morning here in Fort Myers, Florida.
Oh, yeah.
So I appreciate the invite and being on Keeping It Real, right? I mean, love that name. Also love your name, Chuck. My boy, Charlie, when he was younger, growing up, I always said to my wife, when he gets older, he needs to be known as Chuck Adams. Like that's a strong name, hey, I'm Chuck Adams, right? Well, now he's in college. He'll be 21 here in a couple of months, and everybody at college knows him as Chuck. And I'm just like, yes, lifelong goal.
That's what I'm talking about. I was a Charlie till I got into kindergarten, and I decided at that point that I needed to be the baddest kid in the entire kindergarten class, so I became Chuck early. And my parents were the only ones that kept calling me Charlie until they're, well into my adulthood, but I respect that. Chuck Adams is a strong dude, and I'm sure he's a very good-looking guy too, because all Chucks seem to share that trait. So I love it, my friend. I tell you what, this is a really great episode. I'm very excited for. You sent me over a bio, and like I told you before we kick this off, I don't do a lot of research. I like it to be organic, but I couldn't help but read the bio. So I'm absolutely giddy for our talk here, and I always start with the age old. It's not really a question because one time a guy corrected me and he set me straight. I said, I'd like to ask you the question. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Technically, it's not a question, but why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, a little bit about myself before I get into it is that I tend to talk a lot. So, people who are in sales, right? So I can definitely go off on a tangent, but for me, grew up in a small town in Minnesota and loved that experience. Graduated with 66 kids, and after I graduated, moved to Minneapolis, St. Paul area, and lived there pretty much until 2 years ago when I left. So born and raised Minnesota. Minnesota is a hotbed for storm restoration for sure, right? There's a lot of influencers for sure, but just a lot of talent. From Dimitri to the guys at Roofle, and just anywhere in between. So definitely love being from Minnesota and that heritage. But yeah, I got into this space back in 2002. I was a database programmer. Before that, I was a bartender at the Mall of America at Gators Dance Club. Dude. It's like,
gotta love that.
Right?
That's when the Mall of America was really like, happening.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it was a great place to be, and that's how I got into this industry. Oddly enough, we all have our funny little stories how we got into what we're doing. I was bartending with the guy, my buddy Chad Hagan, who owns Fiji Restoration out of Chicago now. Anyway, he grew up with a guy who started a roofing company, and they were doing door-to-door knocking, and it was all storm restoration. So anyway, we met each other at the Mall of America. We kept in contact, and then in 2002, he's like, Ty, you gotta come check this out. I mean, I'm making ridiculous money. And I said, okay, well, Chad was always a great guy, but, trust but verify is what I would say. Right. So I was like, dude, I love what you're saying, but I need to see your bank statement. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I need to see the deposits. If I'm going to quit my database job to go knock on doors. Mind you, this is my first year of marriage.
Yeah, right. Hopefully
I need to last. Right. Well, I would not recommend starting this job in your first year of marriage. Not usually something that goes well. But anyway, so yeah, he showed me his bank statements. It was true. He made about 60 grand in 3 months. And I was like, well, I was making 65 at the time. for a year, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go give this a shot. So I started out in 2002, and I knew nothing about construction. My first customer that I actually signed, she asked me the question. I had some concerns about my fascia and soffit. And I was like, yeah, let me check on that. I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm going to call my manager because I don't want to BS you, right?
Yep, I love it.
So
that's so it's so charming, you know, when you realize how far we've come and how little we knew when we started. It's just, it's awesome.
Yeah,
that's a gold nugget for anybody that's just getting into this industry.
For sure. I mean, it's if you're coachable, if you're inquisitive, if you're willing to learn, this is obviously an industry that has changed both of our lives. But there's just countless people that have done amazing things in this industry. And a big part of it was because they came in and they learned something from somebody else, right? And that's a big key. Obviously, you're talking about your two young bucks you just got on.
Yeah.
You know, if they're looking, one of the biggest things is we're looking for people who are coachable, right? That they're like a sponge, like, tell me more. If they're not bugging you and calling you with questions, they're probably not gonna last too long. Because when we got into this business, I mean, still to this day, I mean, I was dreaming of roofs. I was dreaming of adjuster appointments. I would be watching a movie and be like, oh, I wonder where that house is. They need a new roof.
Yeah, right. That skylight's not flashed properly. What's going on here? I don't believe anything in the movie now.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, that's how I got in 2002. Did quite well, and after about a year and a half, I figured, well, since I know how to knock on doors, my life has changed. My mindset went from kind of that cubicle, week to week, check to check kind of, I'm going to make some money, but if you're making 65 and you're married and if you have kids, I mean, yeah, it was different back in 2002, but still, that doesn't go very far, right? I mean, yeah, you can pay your bills and whatnot, but if you want to do any kind of bucket list things or anything really big, you're not going to be able to do that. So when I got in and knocking doors and understood in my first 6 months, sold 150 jobs, 1.5 million. That's moving. That's going. Yeah. Right. And you're talking back when, roofs were like 11, 12 grand.
Back when $1 million was really $1 million. Yes. Right. I know those days. I remember them well.
Right. Exactly. And that first year, it's really taught me a lot about myself. I mean, that's what you'll learn, especially if you're out on doors. I mean, sales in general is tough. I don't care if you're being fed leads or whatever. But if you're going out and self-generating and you're knocking on those doors, I've always been a confident person all my life, usually have done well in things that I've, applied myself to. And I'll tell you what, man, like 9, 10, 11 times a day, you question your existence. Like, what the hell am I doing out here? Right. You're getting the crap kicked out of you. People are cussing and swearing. And I finally developed the saying that you're really not in this business till the cops have been called on you. Right.
That's right. We've all been there. Unfortunately, I know exactly what you're saying.
Right. So, just getting that mentality and understanding that, wow, I came in, I show up out of the blue. They don't know that I'm even coming and knocking on their door. And 6 months later, I've generated this much in sales. You start believing a little bit, but you need that. You need some confidence. You start believing, wow, I can do anything. So that's when I decided to start my own company, Patriot Service Network, and that was a great adventure. The first couple of years, actually, I didn't really know the business well enough. So my first couple of years at Patriot was knocking on apartment complexes and property management companies. And it wasn't even for storm work. I had a buddy who did painting for apartment complexes and a buddy who did carpet cleaning. And both of them made 6 figures with their business. And I was like, well, I mean, if those guys can do it, then I know how to knock on doors. So I just started knocking on doors. I didn't know enough about the storm restoration at that time. What I mean by that is I thought we didn't have a big storm recently, so I'm going to have to go sell something else until a storm comes along. Since then, I do understand that marginal or small hail can damage some properties, right?
Absolutely.
And then depending on what, how old their roof is, obviously that's a big part of the equation. So if I would have known that, I would have continued to have knocked storms during those first couple of years of Patriot. But so what I did is I just knocked on apartment complexes and property management companies, and I really my pitch was this. It was if you hire me on, I'll take care of your painting and drywall and whatever, and then your carpet cleaning, and that's one less call you have to make. I'll take care of those two things when apartments are turned. And so I basically my two promises were I will pick up my phone. Or I will return my phone call within 2 hours. And that was one of my guarantees when I first started knocking doors for storms. And if you can execute on that, you become a rock star.
Absolutely. Keeping your word. I mean, who would have thunk, right?
Right. And timely communication is like, they're not used to that from a contractor. So that was promise number one. Promise number two was, I promise not to show up to work drunk or stoned. And they're like, dude, you're hired, right?
Nice, yeah. You're better than everyone else right out of the gate.
Right. So that was an interesting time getting Patriot off the ground. I also signed on to deliver the Minneapolis Star Tribune newspaper in North Minneapolis, which is not the best part of town. And I did 350 papers Monday through Friday. And I did that because it was an extra like $1,200 a month that I didn't have to take out of my company. And so, it's just those founder moments, when somebody says, hey, I just started a business. It's like, congratulations, man. That's awesome. I love the entrepreneurial spirit. However, you're probably not going to get much sleep over the next couple of years if you're really serious about getting this off the ground, and your stress is going to be way up here, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I got that going. And then in 2005, I joined up, did a joint venture with some guys that I came up with a business with, and they were down in Chicago, and that company was called Hometown Restoration. And they were Minnesota boys. So I called them and said, hey, we just got a storm. I went up and signed up 30 in my own neighborhood. And as a one-man show, I mean, if you do 30 to 50 jobs,
it's a good year.
You're doing okay.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not starving.
Right. No, you're not. So I was like, called these guys and said, hey, I know you want to come back to Minnesota. Let's, if you want to do a joint venture, they didn't really like the sales part. And I said, I'll take care of the sales. I'll train the salespeople. I'll invoice. I'll do the supplements. I'll go to the adjuster appointments. You guys build it, and we'll be a team. So that's what we did, and that really was a pivotal year for my career, is because I met a guy named Scott Mullins. And Scott Mullins, you need to get on this podcast. This dude is amazing. He's got a ton of different connections as well to the industry. So I started training this guy, Scott Mullins, in 2005, at the end of October, beginning of November, which is not the ideal time to be doing that in Minnesota.
Definitely not. That's tough. That's definitely believing in yourself.
Right, for sure. So I didn't have anybody else to train. And so I was like, yeah, let's go ahead and do it. And this guy came in and worked his butt off and proved to me that you can knock doors during the winter in Minnesota. So if you can knock doors in the winter in Minnesota, you can knock all of the time. And that was a key lesson for me in my development, in that, a lot of northern contractors think, you've got your season. And that's true. You've got your build season. You're not going to be building much during the winter. You can still do siding. You can still do gutters and windows, but primarily you're building, especially if you're doing, 80, 90% roofing, that kind of goes dormant during the winter, but your sales does not have to go dormant. And during that time, from November to March, Scott signed up like 200 contracts. And And I was like, okay, this is amazing. We started in March with having to do all of these adjuster appointments. In fact, we had about 75 alone with American Family. So back at that day, it was faxing. You would fax into, old catfax11 at amfam.com, or, you would, so you'd fax that in, and I gave them all of our claim numbers and said, hey, can you just assign me one or two adjusters so we can knock out all of these claims together? It would be good for American Family. It would be good for hometown restoration. And I got a call back from the claims manager. He said, okay, I'll give you two adjusters. And that was such a beautiful thing. In fact, another lesson for those that are new to this industry, one of those, we got, I'd say 95% of those claims bought. Which is amazing, because that was a 0.75 to 1 inch storm that we were working. And Minnesota, they don't have the match law. They had a court ruling on a match, so it was more like case law that was in place. But the matching was a big part of getting those jobs bought. Well, the first adjuster appointment on one of these, that we had like 30, clear damage. The damage it's about as good a damage that I was going to be working that storm. And the adjuster's like, no, that's old. Nope, that's mechanical. Nope, that's, whatever, fill in the blank with why it's not real hail damage. And my mentality has always been, I'm working with these adjusters. I have empathy. I have empathy for the adjusters, first of all, because they're kind of caught in the middle. They get the pressure from the carrier side, with their buy loss ratios. They're trying to make a living too. They're trying to take care of their family. And so I have empathy in that regard. So if I'm going to disagree, I'm going to keep it professional. I'm just going to like, okay, hey, I completely respect what you're saying. Here's my position. We can agree to disagree, kind of a thing. And we get off that roof and talk to the homeowner. And I let anytime I'm going to disagree with an adjuster, I let them know before we talk to the homeowner. That's just being respectful.
Absolutely. Nobody likes to get blindsided, and it does not make anything better.
Right.
In spite of popular belief.
Right. So anyway, he gets down and talk to the homeowner, and I said, just so you know, I'm not in agreement. I do believe that you, not only did you have cause to make a claim, but I do believe that your roof is in a worse condition because of this storm. So we're packing up our stuff, and the adjuster and I were chatting. He's like, dude, because I really, really appreciate that, man. Like, you're a professional. He said, I don't see that too often. I get into a lot of arguments and fights, and that every single roof that we looked at was bought after that, right? And so that
what a novel concept again. And I would like anybody that's new to the industry that complains about how adjusters treat you in modern times, just know these arguments and these things have been going on for over 20 years, and we've both seen it. So, but it was a lot nicer before, when that wasn't the norm and we weren't out there trying to fight everybody. And I had the same thing when I was in College Station, Texas. I knew the adjusters by name, and you go to the job and it's like, oh, well, you're legit, Chuck, we'll go up there and take some pictures and I'll look at what you've got. And, my buy rate was quite nice there as well. And somehow along the way, it was confrontation wins, and whoever came up with that idea, you suck.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Actually, my first year in the business, and I went to my first adjuster appointment just to watch, and that's what I saw. There was two adjusters. It was State Farm, and it was an adjuster and their manager. The manager was doing a ride along.
Oh yeah,
and it was a woman manager, and the damage on this house was just blatant. But this house had been receiving damage for 30 years. I mean, there was a lot of old damage too. And the guy who was showing me, how to do adjuster appointments blew up on them, and actually called the man. He actually said to the adjuster, who was a man, are you going to let that bitch wear the pants in this relationship? I was like, oh my goodness.
That's going to end well for the homeowner, like, there you go, bud. Thanks. That's,
I was like,
things are best left unsaid.
So at that time, we were supposed to tell our managers when the adjuster appointment was happening so that they would go to it. I stopped telling them because even though I didn't really know much at that point in time, I'd only been in the industry for, I don't know, probably 5-6 weeks at that point in time. I knew that's not how you treat people, right? And so how I really learned, what damage was and what adjusters are looking for is for the next 2-3 weeks, I didn't tell them when the adjuster appointments were. I went there on my own, and I would tell them, hey, I'm new. I know it's not your job, but can you tell me what you're looking for? When I inspect properties, I want to be able to look at this roof, or siding or whatever the case is, from the mindset, like, is this something that would be considered, functional hail damage or functional storm damage, wind damage, whatever the case is. And they were appreciative of that, and they would take their time, and they would point some things out and give me some tips. And in fact, the funny thing is I had an adjuster show me on siding. So if you haven't worked siding much, the best way to see damage on aluminum or steel siding is you spray it down with water, and then you get a flashlight.
Yep.
And those suckers just sing. They just pop out. And so I started using that, and adjusters would get pissed off at me. And I was like, well, don't blame me. Blame the guy at Farmers. He's the one who showed me that.
Right.
So that's how I learned how to interact and just kind of, gauge on the degrees of what damage is. I mean, of course, down the road, I went to Hague and all that, just to, again, just get more educated about it. But I got a call from the manager. He's like, dude, what's going on? Where's all your adjuster appointments? And I said, yeah, I'm going to them. Well, you're not supposed to do that. I'm like, well, I'm getting them bought, and I'm also learning a lot. So, just treat people well. You're not going to always agree with them. And again, if you have empathy, if you know that they're kind of stuck in that spot, I would not want to be in that position. The amount of paperwork, the amount of pressure that they have on their side. And then if they are getting pressure, we all know that, insurance companies, when a storm hits, they kind of set that, okay, the actuarials say, this is how many policyholders we have. This is where the, we're going to spend 30 million on this storm kind of thing. And we know when they get towards that, it tightens up. Okay. It's just part of the business. Right. So again, having that empathy. So anyway, back to 2005, met with Scott Mullins. The guy built 272 jobs in 1 year. And I was the first guy that I really met that he not only kept up with my work ethic, I'll say that he probably even surpassed it, which is, from a prideful standpoint, it's hard to say, but I mean, it is what it is. I mean, this guy will outwork anybody. And at that time I had young kids. So I needed to be home in the evening to help out my wife, because we had two kids. Our first two kids were born within 18 months of each other. So,
nice.
So, being out. And so at that time I was doing more of the sales management and not necessarily, of course I was still knocking on my own, but most of my stuff I could handle before, be home by 6:30. But in order to do that, since I was supplementing and invoicing, I was getting into the office at 3:00 in the morning. And so one day I show up and I'm there working on, an Exactimate, pumping out supplements, and I hear the door open, and it's Scott. I'm like, dude, what are you doing, man? And Scott had young girls at the time, and he had gone through a divorce. So he actually did most of his sales from early morning till 5:00. He had some friends in the apartment complex that he lived in that were able to watch the girls in the morning and then take them to childcare. But then he had to pick them up. So I'm in the office 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and so is he. And in fact, one time it was like 4:30, and I heard him on the phone, and I'm like, "Who are you talking to?" He goes, "Oh, I'm going to go get a check and do a colors meeting." I'm like, "Dude, it's 4:30." He's like, "Yeah, but this guy's up at 4." So he knew that. So I mean, he's out.
Opportunities.
So, right, exactly. So anyway, really fell in love with the guy from the standpoint that just, somebody who was intense. And then the other aspect about Scott Mullins is his father is Roger Mullins. Roger Mullins was one of the owners of ITEL Laboratories, and he and really his brother Mark started ITEL Laboratories. And originally they were just carpet fibers and flooring. That's what they were. And then they ended up buying up a bunch of companies that did siding match. There was sidingmatch.com, and they bought up a bunch of companies that did the shingle match, and they really became the matching capital. Right. And so as contractors, we use ITEL if we're trying to prove something, or there's other services out there, of course, but ITEL really kind of started that whole thing. And ITEL they had sold to private equity. And when they did that, the Mullins brothers kept a portion of ITEL, and then they went for the second bite. So they were resold again. So that was the footprint that Scott saw. But at the time, Scott he wasn't in the business because of that. He was just in the business because he needed to make some money. And his dad, Roger, never, he was always very, very well-to-do and wealthy, but he never, gave Scott, "Well, here's your money. Here's a way to get out of the hole." In fact, that first week that I met, right, the first week that I met Scott, he was on the phone so much. I was like, "Man, this guy's pretty popular." And over time, I heard one of the conversations. Well, the phone conversations were bill collectors.
I was gonna say, sometimes you don't want to be very popular when it comes to phone calls. I get it. I think we've all been there at one point in life.
Exactly, but he had the got to. So this is what I talk about plenty of times about any sales rep, but especially younger guys. When you look at, everybody wants to succeed. That doesn't make you special, but do you got to? Do you have that got to? Do you have to make this work? There is no plan B. This is your plan A, B, and C, and you go all in. Those are the guys, men and women, that I want to work with. The ones that are just like, burn the ships. We're doing this. We're all in. And that's the way that his mentality was. He found it and he went for it. He could have easily begged his dad for not about shortcuts. If there's a shortcut, everybody would be doing it. And unfortunately, the way life works, or fortunately, is the way that we learn best is going through failures and going through pain. Anybody who goes to the gym knows if you're going to develop, you've got to put yourself through some painful stuff. Right. So you're not growing if you're not shaking, right?
That's right. 100%. And you don't want to do it all the time. It's just, hey, look, if you don't do it, you're not going to ultimately get to where you are. And I love that. That's a great mindset to have.
Yeah. So anyway, just to kind of skip forward here, because I could go on and on and on, but ended up Patriot. We ended up growing when I left hometown. Again, did it respectfully, let them know, hey, I'm gonna split off. We were doing a joint venture, but Patriot was kind of behind that hometown. It was two corporations working together, but under the hometown brand. And then in 2007, I was like, okay, I'm gonna split off on my own. We'd done some great work together, and when I left, you always have that conversation, and this is part of our industry. Well, are you going to pay me?
Right.
I've got a lot of work that we did together. How are we going to do this? And again, we did it right. So we had the conversation in December. If you're gonna separate from an opportunity or a company, the best time to do it is, when you're at your low peak, right? That's respectful to the owner, but then communicate people. There's so many people that, if you want to start your own company, great. That's what we all did, right? Just communicate. In fact, if you do communicate and we end this business relationship well, we can continue to be friends. And guess what? I'll probably help you. I'll probably give you tips, right? Instead of being secretive and, kind of blindsiding somebody or trying to steal customers, or in this case, trying to steal reps. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that. Companies get started by taking, 2/3 or half of the staff with them. Now, there's many sides to those equations as well. But when I left hometown, I just said, look, let's agree on what you're on the compensation. We can come to an agreement on that. And if we can come to an agreement on that, I agree not to take anybody, even though I hired all of the sales staff. I hired and trained them. And they said, okay, that sounds good. We shook hands, we signed some papers. And when I left, for whatever reason, they didn't tell the rest of the staff. So on December 31st of 2006, I said, hey guys, it's been real. I'll see you out in the field. And they're like, where are you going? They wanted to come with me. And especially Scott. He's like, dude, you're the one who taught me this business. I'm going with you. And I said, well, first of all, Scott, you need to stay where you're at. You have a ton of money. I mean, he had like probably 100 and half of his jobs were still yet to cap. And I was like, you have a real financial interest to stay here. And then from the ethical side and legal side, for me, I agree not to take anybody. So that's what I did. I broke off and did what I did at hometown or any other place. I put ads out. I started talking to people. I recruited. I trained them. So I got that going. 2008, Scott calls me and he's leaving hometown. He's like, I'm like, well, come on aboard. I mean, I didn't recruit you. You quit. So come on over. So we ended up blowing that up. So 2000, well, I'll say this, in June of 2009, we had one location, Minneapolis. In July of 2010, and this is kind of the tragic love story of, building a business. We had Minneapolis, Denver, Cleveland, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, Cedar Falls, Iowa, Omaha, and Wichita.
You got them about as close to each other as you possibly could. I respect that.
Right.
No stress involved in this scenario, I can assure you.
Okay, so it was one of those things, being a younger owner at the time and not as well versed in business. You can if you're great at sales, if you can produce sales, you think you can do anything. But that's one side of the coin, right? It's like you see the companies that have 40 signs in a neighborhood but no jobs built. That's not uncommon in this business, right? because
very much so.
You can go out and sell it. So what happened to us in July of 2009, we opened up Denver, and in 1 month we had 400 signed contingencies, and we didn't even have an office yet. In fact, our office on the contract was the UPS store in Inglewood, right? so that kind of like, oh boy, we can take over the world. And so we expanded beyond our management capacity. Turns out you need people, right? You need managers.
Happens to the best of us.
Right. So it was a real painful lesson. And then on top of that, we had the industry, construction as a whole was on the downturn from the mortgage crisis. People were in their homes. They had $500,000-$600,000 loans, and now their properties were worth $200,000-$300,000. So I had $1 million stolen from me. That second check from the insurance company across the entire country. They just took that second check and said, "Go ahead, put a lien on my property." What are you going to do? Okay, a lien's going to get you
what
nothing.
What are you going to do? They're there until the day they die, so
right.
they've committed to it.
There's no equity to go after. What are you going to hire a lawyer to sue them? Well, they probably, even, and I've gone through this, even if you sue somebody and you win, if they don't have the money, right?
Can't get blood out of a turnip, guys. It's a true statement.
The only people getting paid in those situations are the lawyers, right? So anyway, I had to take a big slice, or maybe the whole pie, a slice of humble pie, and I had to shut it down in 2011. During that process, Scott had, part of Patriot's demise was I had to get rid of a lot of talented people, and Scott was one of them. So Scott went off, and he was president at a company called Connect Point. Connect Point was a competitor to Eagle View, and gosh, I can't remember some of the other players earlier on, but Eagle View, Pictometry. Pictometry owned all of the images, right? Yep. And then I think Eagle View ended up, buying them out, and they kind of collapsed the space for a little bit. And Connect Point was owned by an adjusting company called Paysetter. They're out of Oklahoma. And so anyway, he was CEO, president of that brand, kind of from the time that Patriot shut down. And then now we're 2011, and he gives me a call and says, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting a company, and I want you to be the president." I'm like, "Well, dude, there's nobody else that have appreciated and respected in this business up to this point, other, besides you, or above you. So yeah, let's do it." So 2012, we got Legacy rolling. He was still working at Connect Point, and I was president, door knocker, garbage man.
Right. The title is impressive, isn't it?
Right.
El Presidente, baby. You go wash my hands. You don't want to know what I was just touching.
No, exactly. So I go out and knock doors, and it's a really interesting situation to knock doors and to say, when people ask you, "Well, how long has your company been around?"
Since Tuesday. Yeah.
Right. So I had to develop, my thought process was this, and this is the way I sold it. It's like, listen, if you had some guys that worked at Microsoft for 15 years, and they decided to split off and start a different computer company, do you think they would know what they're doing? And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's what Legacy is, right? Been in the business for 10 plus years myself, know the ins and outs. We've just started a new company, and then people would sign on. And so we built that up. So built that up for like 6 years, and we started expanding. We had Shreveport. Shreveport is a very interesting market. A lot of great damage, but they don't really care much about building codes there.
Yeah, and I was going to say, you had an interesting story about not getting the second checks. I'm sure that that experience may have trickled down into the Louisiana market.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, a lot of Legacy was born off of two guys working their butts off, no doubt, because Scott ended up joining about 6 months later, leaving Connect Point and then being full-time Legacy. But, a lot of our learning lessons from Patriot, was the foundation to Legacy restoration. So that I always thought that was kind of cool as well. A lot of the same forms, a lot of the same processes, some things have changed for sure. And then that's what you do as a business. You just tweak and get better over time. But yeah, so 2018, we, expand Shreveport, Denver. We're about to open up Chicago. And my oldest daughter at the time, so she would have been 14. She says to me one day, "What are you doing home?" I was like, "What do you mean? I'm home all the time." She's like, "You're hardly ever here." And that was the truth. I was on the road a lot, just getting things set up and getting things rolling. So at that point in time, it made sense for me to start my consulting business, which is the Adams Business Results. And a big part of that was Legacy had hired Jim Johnson to come in and do some sales coaching. That's kind of when Jim Johnson first started. Back in the day, it was Roof Coach Pro.
Absolutely. Right? Shout out to Jim. He's my golf buddy. Yeah. He's awesome.
Jim is a great dude. And so he was at AccuLynx, and obviously Jim was a contractor before he was at AccuLynx. And so having seen, Jim come in and work with Legacy, that kind of gave me the inspiration, like, well, I could do that too. Right. I mean, this is a big industry, right? And so between my daughter and me not being home, wondering, I want to have relationships with my kids. I was lucky enough to have a great relationship with my father. He was a pastor, and so he was around a lot. He went to all my sporting events, and I wanted to be similar to that to my kids. So that's when I branched off and started Adams Business Results and just started working with contractors and helping them grow their business in any capacity. And when you start in doing that, it's a whole different ball game. Even though I know that the contractor side from the inside and out, it's like, how do you gain clients? Well, a lot of it's word of mouth or reputation for sure. But what they will tell you is you should concentrate on just one or two areas, right? Be laser focused and really, you can do sales or you can do financial or whatever. And so I started doing that. But what happened is I would get into an organization and, okay, I'm here to help you develop your sales team. But you don't even have a business plan. You don't have any budgets. You don't have, so I know how to do that. So can I help you do that? Because we can sell all the stuff, but if you don't know what your margins are,
yeah, that's very dangerous. Very dangerous.
Very dangerous. So I had, that first couple of years, had an interesting conversation with a contractor out in Colorado who never became a client, but he took the meeting because we had a mutual friend, and that mutual friend was one of my clients. And so I sat down with him and I asked him, the first two questions I ask when I'm talking to a contractor is, number one, what is your greatest predictor of success? Most contractors can't answer that, or if they do answer it, it's signed contracts or deals, right? Which is not a bad metric, but there's a whole lot of stuff that comes before the signed contract, right? So if your greatest predictor of success is a result, you're focusing on the wrong thing. Because if you're just like, go back to the workout analogy. If your success is, I've got 17-inch biceps and a 34-inch waist, well, how did you get there? And you didn't just get there by going to the gym. You also had to have a dietary regimen, right?
Absolutely.
You had to measure your macros. You had to do all these other things. So that was, one of the first questions. And then the second question was, what are your gross margins? And most of the time you get a blank stare. What do you mean by, do you mean profit? Do you mean, and so then you kind of break it down. Okay, your gross margin. Okay, that's where you're talking about your bills. You're talking about your cost of goods sold. You're talking about your revenue, right? We're not talking about overhead. We're just talking about where are you at on your gross margins. And so this particular contractor, we started off the meeting before I even asked one question. And he basically said, Ty, just so you know, I made $500,000 last year. I'm good. The only reason
I'm awesome
was as a favor. Right. And I was like, dude, first of all, congratulations. You obviously you worked hard, and $500,000 doesn't just fall into your bank. Right. So good job. Congratulations. But then I asked those questions and he didn't know the answers. And so I said, hey, I understand we're not going to be doing any work. You already told me that, but I'm here. It's kind of like when you're knocking on a door. Hey, I'm here. I can do the free inspection, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there. I'm like, so I'm here. Would you allow me to at least look in your AccuLinks and your QuickBooks to try to piece together where your margins are at? He said, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So, there was a lot of missing stuff, but what I could gather was that he was probably in that 37% gross margin range, Well, if you're in Colorado and you're working in insurance and you're working off Xactimate, and I know that's a whole nother.
That's an entire episode to itself, for sure. Right. Oh yeah.
Right, exactly. But if you are going off of those rates, and you should be in that 43 to 45% gross margin in Denver. And so when I piece that together, I'm like, okay, I got good news and bad news. It's like, okay, give it to me. I said, what do you want first? He said, give me the good news. I said, good news is you made $500,000 last year. What's the bad news? The bad news is you left $250K on the table. That's either in your supplier's pockets, it's in your subcontractor's pockets. You're not controlling your margins. You don't. I'll go back to ITEL Laboratories. So Mark and Roger Mullins. Mark, who started ITEL, his office was lined with spreadsheets taped up on the wall. Right? This guy was always in the numbers. He was on top of that. And not that Roger didn't know numbers, but Roger, he was the development guy. He was the relationship guy. How ITEL became so much of a powerhouse is Roger's relationships with the key individuals at the carriers, right? And so and his the way that he sold was, I mean, he didn't. Basically, at the end of a conversation or a meal, he'd say, "How can we help you out?" But he was all about building those relationships. So ITEL had that combination, right, of the numbers and the culture. But you can't just have one or the other, right? You got to have both, because if you know your numbers, but you can't, if people aren't going to stick around because your culture sucks, or you don't really care about your people or their development, people know that, and they'll learn what they can, and then they'll leave. Yep. So anyway, that was I just told that guy back in Denver, I just said, look, I understand you already told me we're not working together. I would be cool if you wanted to, but you don't necessarily need me, but you need somebody like me to show you. And by the way, most owners, they have the acumen. They just have never been taught, right? They've never been shown the way. So it's not like if you bring in a coach or a consultant or whatever you want to, in what other regard that they come in, bring somebody in for 3 months, bring somebody in for 6 months. That investment, that collapses time. Sure, you can learn it and it might take you 5 years, but you pay a little bit of money and collapse that time and learn it in 3 months versus 5 years, and all the mistakes and profit that go out the door in that process. So anyway, that was, a big part of Adam's business results getting rolling. And then, really had a chance meeting at a marketing get together, and met up with Tony Flatham from Built Strong Exteriors. And, he and I both started at the same time at the same company back in 2002, but he was a job supervisor. And, in 2003, he decided to get into sales. And there's another guy you should have on your podcast.
Yes,
I've heard. Tony Flatham is like an amazing dude, and he's about as humble as they come. And our industry, right? I mean,
it's very rare.
If you don't even need to watch, Housewives of Atlanta. All you got to do is go onto Facebook and watch the storm restoration industry, right?
No, I love it. It's professional wrestling come to life. It's so awesome.
So there's so much stuff out there, and Tony, out of anybody, has probably the most right to be braggy, to hey, look what I got. But that's not who he is, and he's really branched out and from a tremendous standpoint in the real estate, and where he owns a ton of properties, like 1,000 doors, right? I mean, and so he actually has a thing. And another reason why you should have him on is it's knock doors to own doors. That's kind of his thing. Is get in and work, make some money knocking doors, and then diversify, right?
Absolutely.
And it's just one of the smartest guys, combined with most humble that you'll ever run into. So anyway, he and I got together in 2018, and he said, "Hey, we've been kind of watching each other's careers in parallel." And he said, I know what you've been doing over at Legacy. I want to get built strong so that we can raise up and become bigger and better. And so we started working together, and I still work with them to this day. So they're my longest standing client. And so we're coming up, it'll be 8 years in November. And, we started off just, working a couple hours a week, and eventually we did a whole reorganization. They're a sales department, and this is the backdrop of a huge success that we had in about a 2-year span. Your typical storm restoration contractor with a door knocker, the sales rep door knocker is doing A to Z except for the build, right? I mean, they're doing the inspection. And of course you do have the setter closer model for sure too. But even in that scenario, the closer is signing the contract, going to the adjuster appointment, going to the product selection meeting, probably involved with, collecting the money. Some might be pulling permits, but, a lot of them aren't, they should visit the build and whatnot. But it's really tough for a sales rep in this industry when they do have all of these responsibilities. They kind of go up and down, right? You build up your pipeline, and then you have to stop selling because you've got to do all these other things.
Yeah, you don't have time anymore.
Right. I mean, hey, the adjuster appointment's at 11 o'clock, so you show up at 10:30, and the adjuster doesn't show up till 2.
Yeah, and you've got to reschedule your 2 appointments you had after that because you're so shoehorned together that you don't have time for anything to go wrong, and it's usually when things go wrong.
Right, exactly. And then likewise, when are you scheduling your product selection meetings? Well, when people are home. Well, when people are home is your best door knocking time. So, that eats up into that. And depending on how good you are at conducting a product selection meeting, I mean, you could be there for 3 hours if you're a talker and if you let them dictate the conversation, or you can get in and out in 45 minutes, of course, depending on the complexity of the job. But that eats into your time. So what we did at Build Strong is we segregated out those responsibilities. So sales reps, they knock doors. Okay. Then we had people who just met with the adjusters. And then we had people who just met with the customer. So it's kind of like an assembly line, a team aspect. So we had a huge storm in 2022, $1 billion plus storm, Minneapolis, St. Paul area. And a lot of that happened in the backyard of Build Strong. So what's common is you see a company that maybe they're at 10 million, 12 million, and they balloon up another 3 to 5 million because they had a great storm. Well, Build Strong went from 21 million to 65 million in 1 year, in one market.
That's impressive, but I also know as you continue to scale, the stress goes with it, and so does the money. The collections at that point are triple, folks. No 60 million sounds awesome until you're in the 60 million range in that scenario.
And that's a big part of it is that you, again, going back to the Patriot story, you got to have the people in place to manage that, right? So anyway, that was, again, a big part of what I do, especially in the sales regard, is I try to get companies to focus on keeping their salespeople selling. All right. And so what happened, and this goes back to when I first started, is it's all about the data. Okay. So I came from the database background. I was a Java programmer. I worked with several different, Fortune 500 companies, in Minnesota. That you've got 3M, you've got Land O'Lakes, you got Best Buy, you got all these bigger companies that everybody knows nationally and internationally. And I was able to get exposure to those companies and to their systems. And so when I first got knocking on doors, we didn't have a Spotty or a Sales Rabbit or a canvassing tool. In fact, I didn't even have a marketing packet. I had a clipboard and a contract.
Right. I was going to say you had a notebook and you had a pen. We remember the addresses by writing them down, and we hope we don't cover them in sweat so they all disappear by the end of the day.
Exactly. So what I did is I took a digital tape recorder, and at that time I had those carpenter jeans with that little side pocket. Oh, yeah. That's where I kept my digital tape recorder.
That was the style. I wish that would come back.
Yeah, that's what contractors look like, contractors, right? So anyway, after every door knock, I would take out my digital tape recorder and I would just record a little 5 to 10 second note. And at the end of the day, I'd sit down on my computer and I'd play that digital tape recorder and on a spreadsheet, which, I'd print them out. We call them street sheets. And you would just have the odd and even. And for each tab, I had the different streets. So I would record anything that was pertinent, not home, of course, that's easy. But I would record if I had a conversation and if I was able to learn something like the guy loves trucks, or he's a Vikings fan, which, pray for us because we've got a lot of, pain that we've had to deal with over the years. But landscaping, whatever it is, I would write that, I would, dictate it, and then I would type it down into the spreadsheet. And then I would take that spreadsheet into my neighborhood and I could see, okay, I talked to these people. They said they weren't interested, but they also weren't jerks. So I'm gonna stop back, right? The reason I did this is because I had to develop some sort of system for myself to have predictability. Because what would happen is, and we've all experienced this, man, you go out and sign 3 contracts and you're on top of the world and you are, you're like, man, I am awesome. And then the next, week and a half, you get your ass kicked. And you're down in the dumps, and why am I here? Why am I doing this? And so I had to kind of develop a system for myself to where I could get that predictability. Back to that question, what's your greatest predictor of success? Well, for me, I started noticing the number of no's that I was getting, and my number of no's was like 22 point something. So between 22 and 23 no's, I got my yes. So before I knew that, my knocking on doors and being rejected and told to get the hell out of here and whatnot, at 14, 15 of those, before I knew it was 22, I'd want to go home. I'd throw myself a pity party. I'd go to the gas station, get myself a Snickers and a Diet Coke, feel sorry for myself, right? And not until I knew that it was at between 22 and 23 it changed for me. Like, okay, 15 no's, all right, we're getting close.
We're almost there. Yes.
Let's just keep going, right? And so I think that's a big part of this in helping sales reps, sales managers, and owners understand that. We've all seen the meme of the guy with the pickaxe who's, he's digging this tunnel and the gold is right there. But he decides to quit, but he's just so far away and he doesn't know it. So regarding that, over time, I would work with the canvassing app material, and I would go through and I would get the downloads. My thing has been time on door. I want to know how much time on door a rep is performing. Not so much, yes, as a byproduct, you can know how much work they're doing or not doing. But if a rep can't answer, and if an owner can't answer, how much time does it take for you to get a contract? Most people can't tell you that. They can guess. They can theorize. Most people if they build budgets, they're going to build budgets off an average revenue number. For a sales rep. So until you know the truth, until you know the reality of the situation, it's really hard for you to give proper coaching. And you can't be with a rep all the time. Obviously, if you've got one rep, you can go out there, but that kind of is self-defeating.
It defeats the whole purpose of having the rep.
Right, exactly. So you got to have tools and processes and different things to be able to understand how to support that sales rep. So what I had done when we first, at Legacy, when we first started using the canvassing tool was Spotio, and I would download the CSV or the Excel spreadsheet, and I would look at their times. Okay, they started knocking 12:01. Okay, next door 12:02. 12:03, 12:07, 12, you go up and then you would see, oh, there's a gap. Oh, there's an hour gap, right? They knocked for half an hour and then they took an hour break. So in that hour and a half, their time on door is half an hour. It's not an hour and a half. So what a lot of companies, they only use their canvassing tool to understand what doors have been hit. They look at their app. They're like, okay, that was a jerk, not, no rude customer. That was the pin they dropped, or not home, or follow up. And they look at that, and that's good. That's great. So we, can get rid of the paper sheets that we had, right? Well, there's so much good data in there that is so powerful that you can use to help coach your companies and your sales reps. So over time, I would do that. That's tough at scale. I mean, you can do that for one or two sales reps, but that takes time, right? So now we go back to time, the great equalizer. How do you spend your time throughout your day? How much time are you knocking on your doors? So when business owners hire and train, like you got two young bucks right now, right? I presume you've hired them full time, or are they part-time workers?
Well, it's kind of an interesting scenario. One of them already owns a successful business. Even at 21, he's got an established landscaping company with 4 years of history. So the learning curve on that's a little bit less than it would normally be. And he's got a lot of commercial clients. So that's a no-brainer right there. The other guy has no experience whatsoever. So we're going to kind of mold him. And my vision, my Keepin It Rio logo just disappeared there in the background. Sorry about that.
Get it back up there, man.
Yeah, I will. But they, the other guy is brand new. This is his first job. And I'm going to kind of develop him into a hybrid type deal because we're a retail-based organization. I think that that's the way of the future with the way that insurance is going right now. And we want to make sure that we can provide these guys the opportunity for success. And, that's kind of the game plan with them. And it's going to pay huge dividends.
For sure.
My screen. There we go.
There you go. Yeah. We're back, baby.
But yeah, it's a very interesting scenario. And I love that because like you say, there's a lot of things that I'm learning here as we're going. And with 28 years of experience, I love the fact that I can still learn things from people and can help ourselves get better and continue to develop and grow and come up with even better systems than we've had. So it's cool. Yeah. But yeah, it's a very interesting scenario to say the least.
So even in that situation, and again, it comes back to time. I don't care if you're door knocking or if your guys are going out on leads. Okay. Again, once you can answer the question, how much time it takes for a rep to sign a deal, you can coach around that. I don't care if it's 3 hours or 12 hours.
Yep.
Well, of course I care, but
I'd like it for 3 would be nice. Yeah.
Right. but 12 also, if they're out selling for 36 hours, they're going to get me 3 deals a week. Okay. That's not bad, right? It's not setting the world on fire, but it's not bad. And if I am a good coach, I'm going to help them get that to 10, to 8, to 7, right? So I'll find out why it's taking them 12. But so many people, and this is where I geek out a little bit from the standpoint that if I love helping people and making money at the same time, right? It's like if you can do both, that's the stuff, right? If you're just making money and you're not making any impact in people's lives, if it's just a me kind of a thing, there's so many things you can do. And to me, that's kind of hollow and shallow. So I like to be able to have impact. Like if I can help a business owner increase their sales, lower their cost of goods sold percentage, greater profitability. It doesn't just help that owner; it helps their whole cut up with you or go with you. Those are going to be problems, and that would introduce the conversation. So when there are problems, not if, but when, because we're building on other people's construction, there's the earth can settle. There's all different things that can happen, right? When something wrong happens, don't judge me on that. Judge me how I respond. And refer to number one. If you've got a problem, I'm going to get back to you within 2 hours if I don't pick up my phone. And when I get back to you and I help, get us to the solution, that's how I want you to judge me. And so you get a couple of things in that. Number one, you're saying I'm a great communicator, but number two, there's going to be problems and I'm going to help you solve them. And that's what people want to know. But it's also kind of a comedic effect. I promise you there's going to be problems. It's like, what? That doesn't seem like a way to sell something, but it is, right?
It's magic. I use that same thing. I tell people, if you love what your yard looks like, don't be here. Shut the blinds. Don't look out the window because you are not going to be happy. But let us go through the process. And when it's all said and done, you're going to be ecstatic. And that's how it always works. But it's expectations. And I try so hard to teach this, don't set unrealistic expectations and don't expect out of others what you expect out of yourself because you'll get pissed off every single time. So there's a huge lesson there, folks.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, you kind of get back to honing in on that how much time it takes to secure a contract. How do you get that information? Well, you can go through your stats. I know some, there's all these different canvassing apps and some of them will kind of give you that, some will gamify things. But to get the reality of the situation, and the reason I use that is because I'm going to tell you about this product that I just developed, which wasn't the reason for coming on the podcast. I hadn't even developed it when we
nice
when we got connected. So until you get to the reality of the situation, you don't know how to help that rep. You also don't know as an owner whether you should keep them or terminate them, right? I mean, it's when you bring somebody in and you're drawing them out or you're giving them salary or you're giving them training pay, you want to make sure that that's your biggest risk of your money when you bring somebody in and you're literally betting on them that my dollars going out are going to come back in multiples, right? If I spend $1 on a sales rep, I'd really like to see $4 or $5 coming back, right? And just like anything else, your marketing, anything else that you want to see your ROI for sure. But many times you don't know that till you get down the road and you've already spent $6,000, $10,000, $12,000, maybe $20,000 because they're a good guy, right? How many good guys? How many owners have spent thousands and thousands of dollars on good guys that didn't produce much in sales? Has that ever happened to you? Right?
Yeah, a couple times, guilty as charged. And everybody I know, I mean, that's just human nature too. Sometimes you just get one of those and it's like, damn, I know he's not like really going to ever make it, but
right.
I'm going to try. I'm going to give it my best. And ultimately it's a huge disservice to that person. So I quit doing that a long time ago.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's part of it is like, if that guy or gal, man or woman, are in this business and they're learning, but it's just not for them, that sucks for them and it sucks for the company. So the sooner that we know that and that we can make a decision, that's best for everybody. So I have fired well over 200 people in my life, not as a prideful thing. It was really tough for me when I first had to get into the firing. because I think of myself as a good guy.
Sure.
Right. Like, I've grew up as a people pleaser and I wanted everybody to be happy around me. And I learned that lesson. But when I finally understood what a good guy does is they tell the truth. Okay. And the truth of the situation is this job isn't for you. And I can't continue to pay you money. It's not good for the company. It's not good for you. It doesn't make you a bad person because, by the way, I contend 10% or less is this position for, like it's for the general population. Yes, most people could do it. There's a difference between being able to do it and having the fortitude to do it, right? And wanting to do it. So it doesn't make you a bad person. It's just, this isn't a right fit for you. Now you go to your 3 T's, okay? Train, transfer, or terminate. Okay. So if things are not working out, you're like, okay, is this on me? Have I not provided the training? Have I not given them material? If it's on me, rush, and we stuck it out just to keep the paycheck coming, right? That sucks. That sucks internally, right? It sucks for the owner who's spending money on that. And, that's a dead end proposition. So to be able to help people know the reality of the situation. So that's what I did. I created this application. It's called Door Reality. It's at doorreality.com. I literally just filed the trademark on Tuesday. Nice. Right. So it's the filing is in. So we've got that. I've got my first initial customers in that are working with it. And basically what it does is it takes your data from your canvassing app and it goes into the Door Reality application and it tells you things. Number one is going to tell you how much time does it take to sign a contract. All right. It's going to give you your utility percentage. What does that mean? Well, do you have an expectation for your sales reps? Like how much time should they be working trying to gain sales?
I guess it kind of does vary depending on the scenario, but if you're a standard residential roofing representative, I think at least half your time should be spent trying to do that. But honestly, 85% of your day should be spent focused on creating revenue opportunities.
Okay. So that's the key part to be able to answer that question. Okay. Well, if it's, let's just say, let's just take 50%, right? So is this a 40-hour a week position? Is this a 60-hour week? What?
Yeah. What is in relation to what? That's like the lifetime warranty. Whose life we talking about here?
Right. Gosh, right. You said it earlier about expectation. Much of life, dissatisfaction or problems focuses around 2 things on expectations. Number one, it's either undefined expectations, right? So if you have undefined expectations, you're setting yourself up for issues. I don't care if it's a marriage, if it's playing with your buddies in softball, right?
And no room for interpretation that's the key.
Right, exactly. So then once you define the expectation, then it's unmet expectation. Well, if you define it, but you can't measure it, how do you know? You don't know the reality of the situation. So let's just say it's a 40-hour work week. And we always joke that when somebody says, "Oh, I worked my 40 hours," we always say, "Yeah, I remember my first part-time job." Right. So, but let's just say it's 40. That means you're expecting them to be selling a minimum of 20 hours a week. Okay. Now you said 80 to 85, so that's more, but we're just kind of going a low case scenario. So 20 hours a week, but how would you know that?
It's a terrific question. And again, I mean, we live in a time where you can get these kind of details and you can understand this information. Most of us still don't do it though.
Right. Well, that's the other aspect. The information is there. So when I would, back in the day when I would download and I would do that counting, I would go through that day. Well, that takes time to do that. Now, if you've got 5 reps, okay, that takes time. And so it just kind of becomes like, okay, you're looking at this and you're spot checking it. But here's another thing I found out. When I was counting, which again, most people don't do, but I'm counting the minutes. Okay, I've got a pretty good situation. When I wrote this program, I stopped checking the minutes and I was checking the seconds. What I found out is that if you don't include the seconds in your time measurement, you will be off by 18%.
Absolutely.
18%.
That's critical. That's very critical. And I guarantee that's overlooked 99% of the time.
For sure. So again, what this application does, what Door Reality does is, again, makes the reality of the situation. So you understand how much time. Now, if you expect them to work 20 hours on door or on sale, right? And this works for whether you're door knocking or whether you have leads. Like if you provide leads to your sales rep, wouldn't you still want to know how much time it takes them to either do an estimate or sign a deal? I mean, it
100%.
Still comes down to allocation of time. So the way that I'm positioning this application, of course, I'm appealing and attracted to the door knockers. That's my life. That's where I've lived for the last 25 years. But it's any field sales. If you have sales that are outside of the office, I don't care if you're a rep for a manufacturer or a distributor, for a contractor. I don't care what it is. If you're out in the field, you're out of view. You're not able to really understand. So what happens is, okay, yep, I'm going to be out 20 hours, and they schedule it on their calendar. 5 days a week, I'm going to be out from 4. That they were out in the field from 4 to 8, but they only worked an hour and a half. Okay. If you want them to work 20 hours on sale for that week and they only do 10, that's 50% utility. Wouldn't you want to know that?
Indeed.
Right? Your expectation is that they're going to be working 20. But you've defined the expectation. Now you're not measuring it. And now you're not holding them accountable. And so you get into all of these things. There's so much sales intelligence around these dispositions and these canvassing apps. So what Door Reality does is it takes it even a step further. So you've got a section where you can put your goals in for the company, for a location, for a sales rep, for a team, whatever, it doesn't matter. But let's just bring it down to the granular sales rep. Okay, the sales rep has a goal of, let's just put that number 100,000. Everybody says 100,000, even though 100,000 isn't much these days, but 100,000 is more to somebody that's never made 100,000, right? So you put 100,000 in there, and now that you have the data, that you understand how much time it takes them to sign a deal, now you can really provide coaching. Okay, if you understand it takes them 10 hours to sign a deal, you plug it into the Door Reality system. The sales manager types it in. And that's the key to this is the sales managers going over these numbers. We want our sales managers getting together with their sales reps. That's very important. But they type it in, okay, 100,000, and then it looks at the system and it says, okay, this is how much their hours per contract, and it tells them, okay, for the rest of the year, this person has to average 27 hours on door to get to their goal. There's not the system does the math, right? And then every week that you get together with your rep, you would then obviously the things that change. What have you paid them in draw or salary, and what commissions have they brought in? They've got commissions that they've earned, and they've got commissions that are pending. Commissions that are in the system but they haven't realized yet because the job isn't done, right? It takes all this information and gives you the sales rep on the granular level, understanding what it's going to take for them to get to their goal. But up to your position as an owner, you can take a look at the whole company and say, okay, my budget for this year was 10 million in revenue, whatever the number is. It'll tell you what your company has to do that week
to get there.
Right. And are you going to have a shortfall? So when people who budget and plan, that's great, but rarely is it going to happen. You're going to hit that budget. What is life about? Life and business is about, okay, here's our plan. Here's where we're at. What kind of pivots? What kind of, right? What kind of things do we got? The earlier you have that information, the more powerful and potent you're going to be as a business, as a coach, right? And then we go back to the sales rep. This is the support that they need. They need to understand what's the reality of the situation. Are they able to go out, and the price doesn't go up until you're at 3 locations, right? And so it's most companies, 98% of them are not going to have 3 locations.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's why I've tried to position this for the majority of the market. And it doesn't, the thing that sucks is when you're like, oh, if I buy one more seat, then I go up to this next level, right? It's like, no, man, you want your people in. You don't want to have to get
the scarcity mindset out of here, guys. It's going to be all right. It's going to be okay. If you add 2 more people and you have to spend a little bit more money just to accommodate, believe me, it will be worth it.
Right. So what I would encourage folks to do is to go to doorreality.com. Whether you spell it with 1 R or 2 R's, doesn't matter. It goes to the same place. But
nice.
There's 2 tools on that site. All right. One is it's got 11 questions. It'll take you less than 2 minutes to answer, and it will tell you where you're at as far as understanding your sales and the time that is spent. Okay. And time that your sales managers spend with your sales reps, right? So it'll give you kind of a predictability of how well you have your arms around the time that is being put in to selling whatever you're selling. And then there's an ROI calculator. And one of the things that I love about that is it shows you that you don't have to.
But Steve, go get him, buddy. And Steve's sitting at the gas station eating hot dogs. So I really like that. And I think that some of the stuff that you've brought in here is it's mind blowing to me because it's stuff that I have never thought of really. And I've been around a lot of really high level people in our industry. And I can say, a lot of people haven't been thinking like that. So I think you've come up with something that could be very groundbreaking for our industry. Not just roofing, but I think, service businesses across the globe. And man, what an exciting opportunity. And I think right now is the best time to get in with something like that because things are shifting around, things are moving. And I think now we're going to be at a point where efficiency is going to be much more important than actual volume when it comes to reps, when it comes to everything that we're doing. You don't want to waste a bunch of time. You don't want to waste a bunch of resources. So dialing it in as perfectly as you can and having a resource that can help you do that, have a strong feeling, my friend, you are about to be onto something big. So I love it. And I'll tell you what, Ty, we've been on here for an hour and a half, my friend. This has been an amazing conversation. You've really enlightened me, quite frankly. And I thank you for that. Thank you for taking the time to be here on Keepin It Rio, episode 267. And what I'd like to do, I'd like to set an appointment right now for 1 year from today or 1 year from whenever to come back and review how the progress has been made throughout today until a year from now. And it's always amazing to see how far people go in such a short period of time. I have a feeling that yours is going to be exponential growth. And I want the open invitation to be out there right now because I sincerely think you got something big, my friend. So that is awesome. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being here. Like I said, this has really been a lot of fun and I've enjoyed every minute of it. I got to get bouncing here in a minute because I've got an appointment in about 30 minutes. But this has been so cool. And I want to thank all the people that watch Keepin It Rio for sure. I love you guys. 267 episodes.
That's amazing.
My goal is 2,500. So I mean, hey, I'm on the second 10 now, and we're gonna get there eventually. And if we don't, we don't, but it's good to have a big, audacious, stupid goal like that. And I've got one.
For sure.
Everybody that's been a part of it has been awesome. And before I bid adieu to the audience, y'all know what I'm going to do because I do it every week. I have to give glory to my sponsors at Roofer. These guys have been amazing to me. They take care of our roofing business. They take care of the podcast. Been my sponsors now for 4 years. Nice. And it's been an amazing relationship. I absolutely love everybody at Roofer. Thank you guys for that. And before we say final goodbyes, Ty, there's one thing that I love to do on every podcast, and it is the corniest tagline in the history of the world. And I created it myself. Therefore, I know it's corny and nobody can make fun of me because I make fun of it myself. Keep on keeping it real, everybody. We'll see you guys next week. And Ty, stick around. We've got promotional consideration by my sponsor here. You and I will finish our conversation on the other end of that. But thank you guys. Until next week, keep on keeping it Rio. We'll see y'all later. Yeah. I found Roofer online about 7 years ago, used it one time, and it's been the only thing I've used ever since. It's basically a program that makes your life a lot easier to measuring roofs, putting together proposals, things of that nature. Roofer fulfills every need that we have. Our homeowners are always impressed by the presentation. They're able to kind of look at things differently and learn at their own pace. They sign the documentation online. It's the #1 CRM in the industry. Everything that you can get with Roofer is going to help your business grow. I think that y'all should